So we're going to do something, I guess, a little different than some of the other sessions. And it is one of the things I've offered to do during this space of time, which is to keep it a little bit the same and a little bit different. So what I'd like to do in a moment is begin with an opening meditation. It's a favorite of mine. It's something many of you have done before. Some of you have even done it with me. So we're going to start off with a little guided meditation, and then we'll move into a moment of prayerfulness. And then I'm going to kind of do just like a little bit of a talk, like a talk. And I'm going to use a slide. So I'm actually going to show you a PowerPoint picture. And I realized that, this is a real mixed group, right? There's some people that I know here and I've known very well and have heard me present similar material probably 100 times. There's some of you I know, and yet you've never heard of it. And some of you we're just meeting. So it seems like it might be a good day to just get on the same page. With that, I thank you for being here. And we're going to settle in now to our opening meditation. Do the best you can. If you're doing other things, maybe you want to stop just for a little bit, be a part of this, then you can get back to it. So sitting comfortably but alert, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. You may want to start by putting one hand over your heart and one hand over your belly. I find this a great way to settle in, to slow down. And then to begin, we're going to practice a very specific kind of breathing technique. So with eyes closed, you're going to breathe in through your nose as much as you can, and then you're going to breathe in again. So it's big breath in, and then one more breath. And then a long exhale to the fullest extent possible. And we're just going to work with that breathing pattern for just a minute. Big, long breath in, and then another extra breath. And then a long, out through your mouth, long exhale. And let's repeat that. You go at your own pace. Really concentrate on the fullness of the inhale and the additional breath. And then the long, long exhale. When you're ready, you can put your hands down if you like, put them comfortably on your lap or palm within palm. And keeping the pattern, long breath in and another breath in. Long, long exhale to the absolute maximum extent you can. Breathing in and an extra breath in. Long, long exhale. Continuing the breath while I'm talking. This is a great breath that works quickly to calm the mind, slow down the body. And it's a wonderful way to release, really release a lot of carbon dioxide and really breathe in, or monoxide, breathe out, exhale a lot of the toxins in the body, and then really invigorate the oxygen intake. So it's a wonderful breath physiologically, but it's also a great breath to prepare for meditation in through the nose. And then as the breath becomes full, one extra breath in. Long, long exhale. And the other aspect of this breath that's so powerful is if you really extend that inhale. and you really extend that exhale, you're going to slow your breathing down until you're only breathing about 3 or 4 cycles per minute, which both spiritual traditions and scientists have come to lift up as a powerful breath for the nervous system, for calming the mind, opening the heart. And then one last cycle, big, 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 big breath in, and then a little extra at the top. And then the long, long exhale, after which I'm going to ask you to keep your eyes closed and sit quietly. Turning your attention for a moment now to your senses, noticing sounds, smells, temperature, maybe taste in your mouth, the feeling of the fabric against your skin. So just take a moment to tune into your physical world. Let that bring you into the present moment. Notice any discomfort, tension, and then with a breath of grace and gratitude, let's cultivate a little space as we observe our bodies and our senses. And yet we also acknowledge we are aware that there is a distance between that which is observing and that which is observed. So let's bless these bodies in any way you want, quietly. Say thank you to your body, give thanks, and yet affirming, I am not my body. I am not this body, this gift that's carried me through life. I am something more. Shifting your awareness to the world of thoughts. Notice the quality of thoughts today. Are you distracted? Is your mind busy, jumping all over? Is it quiet? Is it calm? What has your mind been like this morning? Engaged, active, slow, steady, confused? Just tuning into the quality and nature of your thinking today. And then again, stepping away from the thinking, acknowledging that our thoughts are such powerful, powerful aspects of who we are, shaping our world, shaping our experience, even shaping our bodies. And yet, whatever we can observe, we are not. So I have this mind, these thoughts, this intellect, and yet I am more than my thoughts. So in your own way, a feeling of gratitude, a word of thanks for the power of your mind and the awareness that you are something more. Tuning now into your emotional condition. How are you feeling right now? How have you been feeling today? Frustrated, sad, anxious, depressed, happy, worried? Just notice your emotional world. Notice what you're feeling, label what you can, and consider the nuances of our emotional world more than just happy, sad, and angry. What's the morning been like? And again, taking this time and space to acknowledge our emotional world and the power of our emotional lives, and yet the distance between that which experiences our emotions and the emotions themselves. And you can feel, think, envision yourself feeling grateful, feeling thanks, saying thank you to your emotional world, which drives your life like an engine and yet does not define you. Although sometimes it might feel like it does. And then with a final movement inward, I invite you to take a moment just to very lightly hold the awareness of being aware. Notice the sensation of awareness, not thinking about anything, not feeling anything about anything, but opening your awareness to the simple presence in this moment. Stillness, silence, and the presence within you that senses it all. Feel that stillness and silence. And from this place, we can move into a prayerfulness for life. And as I offer this prayer, you can take the time in the way that is most nourishing for you, staying in meditation, being with gratitude, praying in your own way, or just feeling the words. To the oneness that is all, to the love that is this life, energy, consciousness, light, and life. Angels and ancestors, grandmothers and grandfathers, to all that watch over us and hold us and help us in the light. In this moment, we say, thank you. Thank you to all the forces that love us and lead us on this soul's journey. May we learn to embrace each and every aspect of who and what we are without attachment, without clinging to identity, with effortlessness, with patience, with gratitude. May we learn to learn in each moment and every moment as an act of service to the world, an act of devotion to the mystery that we come from, the mystery that we are. May we find every moment of our lives an opening towards harmony, towards peace, towards forgiveness, towards acceptance. May we find strength in the movement from aspiration, the movement from growth and elevation to the simple embrace of wholeness. Guide us, support us in this often painful transition as we let go all the stories and habits and practices that we have picked up to keep ourselves safe today in the spirit of oneness, in the company of each other. May we feel our safety. May we know, taste, sense our inextinguishable nature, and draw our life force and daily root from that vast, eternal force. From this place, we send a light, we send our love to each other. All who hear these words in this moment and any moment, we hold you with love and light. Whatever you long for most in your highest good, we celebrate that too. We lift up your prayers. We amplify each other's deepest longings in this moment. And we offer our prayers and blessings to the world, whatever's in your heart right now, whatever places, whatever people, to life itself, to our planet, to our species and all species and beyond. Wherever your prayers need go, we are here together to say yes, to lift them up and let them go. And healing for ourselves, that we may awaken to the beauty of what it means to be a good relative in this life, brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, mothers, fathers, and other relations that we may not even have yet named. May we find ourselves as family. May we feel ourselves as family and live with that compassion. For all these things and the prayers that remain unspoken, we lift them together and say, Amen. And some of you may want to just take an extra moment to be quiet. Some of you may be ready to come back to the group. So the topic that I wanted to talk about today, or share some thoughts and reflections on, in some ways is simply the topic of perspective. And yet what I'd like to do is elaborate within a framework, and I shared this at the beginning for some people that were on the call early, a framework that's really central to most of what I do. And and there's even a video out there somewhere. I think it's called the 3 channels of, I don't even know what it's called, 3 channels of perception or something like that. So I'm gonna put this slide up. And so, as I've said, this will be familiar to some and not so familiar to others. So some people see this as like a mental model or a framework for how we understand the human condition. And it's certainly, I think, a pretty effective way to explain any moment we can find ourselves in, any decision we have to make, any struggle we might be going through, or for that matter, even to simply explain the spiritual journey and its nature of unfolding. Both of the pictures on the screen, if you're looking at your screen, are essentially saying the same thing. It's just different language. So in a context like humanity's team, I feel very comfortable talking about spirit and soul, shadow and self. But if you want to use the same model in your own daily life or talk to someone about it after today, there's safer, more universal language. And that's over here on the other side of the slide. You see the words universal, essence, wounding, and conditional. So in some ways, you can see these concentric circles as the story of human unfolding. We begin in the universal, the mystery, right? Whether you call that God, source, spirit, the divine oneness that we emerge from, okay? And that is a place that we all share an ancestry in, and we all have as a common origin. And it's also a place within ourselves that we all carry today. That place of oneness, I would suggest, is the same in all of us, almost by definition. And interestingly, we have seen that in the world's scriptures and poetry and religious traditions, we've seen people everywhere and throughout time talking about the purest experiences of oneness and consciousness in which there are not two. Now, my favorite book on this topic is no longer in print. W.T. Stace, The Teachings of the Mystics. If you're lucky, you can find it in a used bookstore. And there's so few now, I think the Amazon prices are going up, probably because I bought the last 2 or 3. The Teachings of the Mystics. It's an old book, but golly, I think this guy does a brilliant job of working through the world's religious traditions and highlighting this one particular phenomena of experience that shows up again and again. And he calls it the undifferentiated unity of being. I remember reading that as like a 16-year-old and thinking like that's a mouthful, right? There's a $20 statement, but boy, the clarity of that statement really speaks to the universal self, the undifferentiated unity of being. It's not the place where I say, hey, you and I are family, because there's no you or I in that space to even be family. We're talking about a deeper place. It's a place where we are quite literally one and the same. You are an expression of me. I'm an expression of you. We are aspects of this thing we call God. And of course, in religious tradition, that's expressed all kinds of ways. We might say, I am God, or God is me. We can say it in all kinds of ways. The point being that this is both a way of understanding where we come from. It's also a place within ourselves that we share. And I would argue that it is a perspective. So when we are facing anything in our life, any choice, decision, challenge, or change, I would argue it's worth sitting with your situation and seeing it through the lens of each of the 4 perspectives we're going to move through. And interestingly, when it comes to reflecting on circumstance, I suggest you move from the last one we're going to talk about, conditional, back towards universal. On the other hand, when you're planning something, I always recommend a process, a ceremony, a life choice. Start with the universal. Start by clearing your mind, letting go of expectations, letting go of history. Start with the quietest, most open place you can. All right, let's move on. So what's this next layer? Okay, it's lovely to think we all, or feel or know that we all come from this undifferentiated unity of being, from this sub-manifest quantum reality, as Deepak Chopra would say. But geez, man, like, is that really driving your car to work? Is that really picking your cereal at the grocery store? At some level, yes. And of course, at some level, no, right? We come into this human world, this human domain, and there is something essential to each one of us. And that's what I would call, in my language, the soul. So the soul, born out of spirit, enters into the human dimension through the physical, realm, and seeks its expression. Maybe even seeks isn't the right word, expresses itself. And most of us, this is old news, right? Think about when you were young and the way young people just naturally express talents and aptitudes, right? I was talking with Chris at the beginning. Some of us just love water. Joni showing all the books. Some of us are people of the book, right? People of words and poetry. Some of us, they're people of the body, right? And it's all about getting out there and moving. We can be many of these things, but the point is that there is an innate nature to each of us, and we all have our gifts, our talents, our personalities, and so on, so much of which comes into this world with us. Now, we can deconstruct any of these things and talk about them forever, right? Does it contain past life memory? Sure. Does it have the imprint of karma? Probably. But that's not where we're at. We're trying to keep things simple here, so let's take a breath. We have the essence. What's most important about the essence is this is our place of authenticity. And what we find is that the more authentic or aligned we are with our essential self, the more effortlessly or naturally the universal presence appears in our life, right? It's like the closer we are to our truest self, the closer we are to connecting with the self that is no longer personal. In the Hindu tradition, there's an old saying translated, Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman, which means the truest self is God and God is the truest self, right? That's the point of connection. But that's nice to say, and then some might already be wondering, yeah, got it, Jonathan, right? We come from this cosmic mystery of oneness. It's lovely. And then I'm born with all this magical stuff that makes me me. So then why do I still get stuck? And why do some of my relationships still not work? And why do I feel frustrated or lonely or whatever it might be? Well, that's because you're on planet Earth, my friend. And that's the name of the game. And I would argue that that friction, which we experience as emotion, is a part of the energy that is cultivating the soul itself. It's actually cultivating the soul itself. So there is no, in my worldview, there is no, I will be more spiritual when I stop having these struggles or challenges. They are one and the same. They are a part of each other. And it doesn't mean we have to struggle to be spiritual. It doesn't mean we have to be spiritual to struggle. It just means it's all in there together. Because ultimately, I use these images in this sort of progressive format, but really it's the universal self that holds everything. And then the essential self holds everything in that. And then the wound becomes this kind of filter that affects the way we see the world, the way we make decisions about our place in the world, the way we formulate our identity in the world. So yes, we have this, you might say, pure, true self that we are born with, but then life shows up. Parents, environment, culture, condition, gender, generation, poverty, wealth, trauma, addiction, you name it. And that energy then must be resolved, right? It has to find its release. And if we don't have the ability to release it, then what we do is we create a conditional self that reflects the wounding. And yes, the essence, and maybe even yes, the universal self. And to all of us, it's different degrees. The wound wants us to be safe. The wound often wants us not to feel those shitty things again. And so, along with our culture and conditioning and essence, we create a self that keeps us from the discomfort of the wound until we realize one day that the conditional self is vulnerable, and maybe vulnerable is not a good word because we use that positively, is brittle, is fragile, to the degree that it reflects the wound. It is resilient. It is energized, the degree to which it reflects the essence. Now, will we ever have a conditional self in this life that does not reflect, childhood or wounds? I don't know, probably not. And I think it's okay because that's the way this has been built. But the opportunity in this conversation is to see that we have choice and to love every level of this being, and to remember that each level comes with a perspective. Each level shapes our perspective. When we enter a room or a meeting and we feel cautious, that's typically the wound that we're seeing through. Ooh, I don't know if I like people like that. I don't know if I like that worldview. I don't know if I like the way they said that. Or we want people to see us a certain way, so we manipulate or control what we say, how we say it, and so on. But ultimately, any important life circumstance, if we're really going to learn and grow, we can recognize that all four dimensions of self have something to contribute to that whole story. So let's look at it through the lens of who we are in particular, the body we have, the gender we identify with, the culture we identify with, the generation we identify with. Let's be honest about the interplay of our hurts and reactions and triggers and woundedness, and let's celebrate what makes us unique and our authentic sense of self and voice and gift, and yet hold it all in the vastness of the universal identity, the universal self, the universal consciousness, because with the universal consciousness as that final lens, no matter what we've encountered in the examination before, we can hold it with a certain lightness, and we can hold it with a certain openness, and we can hold it with a willingness to let go. But I would argue that many of us become preoccupied with a spiritual journey that is really soul and shadow and self, and forgets to invite God in. I think I just had a Wayne Dyer flashback. What was it? Oh, he used to say, ego is edging God out. And I believe that what he was pointing to is that there is a great power in recognizing that even though that universal force lives within us as us, and we can access it through our authenticity, there is extraordinary power, healing, value, for lack of a better word, of maintaining an active relationship with God in all things and beyond. And beyond. So when we invite mystery into everything, it means that no matter how certain we are, we hold a little space for curiosity. No matter how important something is, and we grab and cling to it, stay devoted, we keep a little looseness, a little lightness. No matter how disappointed we might feel in where we're at or what we're going through, we are reminded that it's all It's all spirit. And it's all a part of this formulation of who and what we are. So I'm going to stop there. And I'd love to come back to the big group, see where you're at today. We thought we might experiment. I say we, Garth and I were visiting about this, with maybe instead of going into smaller breakout groups today, although we're always open to your feedback. Let's see if we can come back to the gallery view and get some questions, comments, contributions. And I'd love to start off in particular with people who want to clarify something. Like, is there a piece that was sort of like, well, that doesn't work for me, or I didn't agree with that, or could you say that again differently? And then we can move to maybe other people's insights or your experience of these things. You're certainly welcome to chat anything you want, and I will keep an eye on the chat. And if you want to put out a question or a point of clarification, I'm going to invite you just to unmute yourself and jump in. So who's brave enough to come in? Lisa, are you reaching to unmute? Okay.
Yes, Jonathan.
Okay.
I do have a question. So I was taking notes and I got spirit, soul, shadow, but I kind of stopped at self. So I'm kind of missing a little piece of the difference between the shadow wounds, because that's, to me, it's kind of like part of the self, but the self is so much more than just the wounds. So if you can kind of elaborate on.
Yes, sure. That's really a fair question. So we do run into a little problem with language here, and I'll just say that's the only issue here. So if I were to try to use self in every level, I might say the divine self for the inner core, right? The true self.
The essence.
Or the essence, the wounded self, and then the socialized self. But in the model where I chose to use self, shadow, soul, and spirit, we might come at the question differently. Why would I choose that framing? I use that framing in some settings because I want to communicate through that way of portraying it, that it's all the self. It's all us. And it's all okay. And the reason why that's important to me is that when we start making the authentic self, the true, the good self, the right self, the only self, and the self that I chose to cope or survive or whatever, somehow bad or wrong or false or not really me, I don't buy that, honestly, for me. Now, I'm not saying that's not true for you or some, people listening, but it's like, of course it's you. I mean, people live for 30, 40, 60, 80 years operating from the, what some would call the false self. And I don't think that's fair. That's the self that their soul participated in allowing them to be in this life. And if in this life they needed to be disingenuous, if in this life they needed to be disconnected from spirit, in this life they needed to be, abdicating their voice, I don't know. I don't know their soul's journey. I don't know what they're, so to speak, here to learn. So it's interesting you pointed out that model, because it is for a reason. And it's basically to say, hey, the self is the self. Whoever you show up as, that's you.
Okay.
And if you want a fuller experience of energy, a fuller experience of connection, a fuller experience of life, then I suggest integrating more.
Yes.
Work through that shadow and bring more into the light. Know your essence and let it reflect through the self. But let's not shame people for coping.
Right.
let's not shame people because they were traumatized or abused or shamed. You know, if you look at the world and the billions of people that live marginalized, that would mean like they're all wrong because they're acting a certain way so that they're not, you know, whatever, depending on their country, put in jail, abused by their spouses, stoned in the streets. I don't think, I think there's an unconscious judgment that creeps into the spiritual world where the young consciousness, the masculine consciousness saturates our spiritual understanding of self, and we want to start pulling rank. I'm more spiritual than you. I'm more authentic. You're more false, blah, blah, blah. So I'm kind of going off on this because I think it's important, you know?
No,
I think
very helpful.
we're all spiritual beings and we're just kind of playing out this human game in different ways. So thank you for asking a question that gets me fired up. See, when people do that, it's like, oh, okay, you think we have time for 20 questions? And turns out with Jonathan, we have time for one. Can't shut up. Someone else, I saw someone else was about to unmute themselves and put a question in. Where did you go? I see a few. Golly, it was someone without her camera on. Where did she go? Well, darn it. Okay, if I think she's not here. Go ahead, whoever wants to. I think I see Deborah and I think it's Peter. Deborah, do you want to jump in first, then Peter? So hop in, Deborah, if you want to unmute. Peter on deck, and then whoever else has something you want to contribute, get yourself ready. Deborah.
I really love your model and I can associate with it very nicely, except it just doesn't seem quite lively enough for me. And I think it's because I come from nursing, really from healing with the hands. So, and I've been studying heart math and all that. And I'm thinking, where's the action here? You know, it would be, to me, I would be having the, brain, mind, heart, hands, and soul, spirit. I would add those. And I'm just wondering what you think about that. And when you get into the essence of something, where would that be placed? I mean, it could be in most any area because you work with the whole person, even though you're using one part of yourself. Would it be body? But it doesn't really, just saying body doesn't explain the compassion that comes from the hands.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could kind of
Elaborate. Yeah.
around a bit and see.
So first of all, I really appreciate the observation, and I share the same feeling, which is there's a certain flatness to anything you can put on a slide, right? So two things to keep in mind as an idea. One is that I, in some settings and conversations, will take the universal essence wounding conditional model, okay? So now you got to use your imagination because I can't do the edits quickly here right now. And then put them concentrically even. So just imagine that with your mind. That means each one is set inside the other. And then divide it in 4 quarters and assign mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And then it gets really juicy, right? Because suddenly you have the way spirit works through the body, essence works through the body, wounds work through the body, mind works through the body. Sorry, I just flipped those around. The conditional self, the wounded self, the essence, and the universal all have expressions in mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual ways. So to your point, this whole thing could really be not only 3-dimensional, but moving, right? It's an energy model.
Right.
But there is one more thing I'm going to throw out since you invited just a little more comment. It's not a direct response to what you're saying, but I'm going to find a way to make it like that. When it comes to the healing journey, one perspective that I like is to consider a kind of, I don't want to use the word hierarchy, but a kind of healing flow. The deeper we go into the soul, the greater the capacity to heal the heart, the emotional heart. And as we heal the emotional heart, the greater the capacity to heal the limiting thoughts and beliefs, the struggles of the mind. And as we heal our relationship to our mind and grow a greater mastery there, the more we can engage the body and the physical world with intentionality. Now, it's not like the world's not that linear, but it's kind of a nice sort of idea, or a nice way of putting it. The soul heals the heart heals the mind heals the body. And what I feel like you're bringing up for us, which is a really rich and complex thing we could spend all day talking about, is that, well, two things. No matter what we portray, it's not the whole story. And there's a certain flatness to it. And the other thing is that these are really reflections of modes of awareness and consciousness, which can be applied through anything. So people can touch from spirit, touch from soul, touch from wounding, touch from social acceptance. So it's a lens that could be applied in all formats, that helps to sort of explain the magic of those things. And just one other quick nuance, I think that we often feel this in the arts, and music for me is a great example. There's a way of hearing music that is technically perfect, but lacks soul. We've all heard that. Like, oh yeah, this piece is played well. I don't have any desire to hear it again, but yeah, that was right. And then we hear songs that are imperfect, right? Like the Leonard Cohens and Bob Dylan's, really imperfect musically. That perfect would be the conditional, but so much woundedness, honesty about woundedness, and so much soul, that there's this resonance in a place in ourselves that wants expression. So we don't even care if it sounds kind of wonky. And then there's, music that's sublime and so on. And then there's the music where you see a performer and whether that's, I don't know, I'm trying to quickly come up with an example off the top of my head. So whether that's Itzhak Perlman or Ed Sheeran, I don't know, I'm trying to come up with diverse examples. You see people that were just born to do what they're doing. It comes out of them like breath. And it moves us to tears, and it's one of the reasons those reality, performance shows are so popular. Obviously, this sensationalize them, but people catch glimpses of just the pure integration of all these layers. So yes, life is much richer than the model, and any behavior can be engaged with any of those 4 levels of consciousness, and sometimes multiples. So lots more to say, but
Can I just ask you one more thing?
yeah.
So what you're actually saying is that this is universal. So if somebody went to teach nurses, they might add that element in one of those places. If you were going to teach plumbers or, so this is the model, and we're really the people that have to put the little templates in for each action, so to speak.
That's the way I see it.
Okay, good. I needed that clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's the way I see it. Yeah. And I'm tempted to go on, but I'm going to hold my tongue, and we can still get in a couple more people. Peter, I think you had your paw in the air. Is there something you wanted to? There you go.
Okay, there we go. Wow, man. Some of this stuff is too complex for me. You know what? With smartphones, I feel I've lost my entire privacy in life. And I don't know whether that's good, bad, or what. But, when I was a kid, I get out of school and I go hang out in the woods. And then at 5 o'clock, the fire department would blow the 5 o'clock whistle, and then we were all supposed to head home, you know, and everything in between was just like my time, you know, to explore who I was. And I'm probably off the subject, but for some reason, I got hit on that. Everything you say makes a lot of sense, but you know, it's just beyond me of the way things are in the world today. I don't know. You shouldn't
So,
really, you shouldn't talk to me right now because I spent too much of the last 2 days thinking about things, you know.
well,
But
Peter, I'm going to jump off,
uh,
or I'm going to respond to that, because I actually think it is very relevant. And I'm going to jump in only so that we can also get to Lanny. But, you know, I think, if you don't mind, Peter, I'm going to jump in and say, you know, I think that what you're pointing to, in my mind, is that the deeper we go into the model, right? In other words, as we move from the conditional mind, the conditional awareness, the conditional world into the center, it's a movement towards simplicity, right? To be in the forest and just be, no agenda, no concept of time. We fall naturally into relationship with soul and spirit. And many of us, probably all of us, have had those places and moments where we didn't have to make this into models. We didn't have to make this into books. We didn't have to make this into practices. We just did it. We just felt it. On the flip side, the challenge with the modern world, so to speak, and in particular all the devices that many of us have, is they pull us not only into relationship with the conditional world, but they pull us into the belief that the conditional world matters most. And the funny thing, because I'm very interested, so I'm going to make a quick comment on this, and then we'll get to Lanny. But just as a kind of accentuated point, you know, I have a real fascination with the topic of artificial intelligence. I mean, I'm not against technology per se, and it's here whether we like it or not. But the thing that strikes me as so interesting, both about those that fear it and about those that love it, and this I think highlights Peter's point, is they all act as if it even matters, right? And what I mean by that is, this is going to be a revolution in human technology unlike anything that's ever hit the planet. I believe that for sure. More than writing, more than fire, more than the wheel. What's coming is beyond imagination. But remember, that's only in the digital realm. It's not going to replace sitting by a river and watching the leaves float by. It's not going to replace the magic of watching spring unfold wherever you live. It's not going to change your ability to prepare your food for yourself or your best friend. There's so much richness to life. So yes, it feels like they want all of our attention, but as far as I'm concerned, there is nothing of value that a phone can steal from me. If it knows what I read, if it knows who I talk to, who friggin' cares? You know, it's welcome to track my shopping habits and when I go to the bathroom, but it knows nothing of the joy in my heart when I sit in the forest. And that's what matters most to me. Now, having said that, we got to move on. We're going to squeeze in a couple more. Lanny, how about you? What did you want to add or ask today?
Yeah, you touched me when you talked about the wounding as something to learn from in a certain way. Can you go more into that? Because I definitely react to wounding. And I know it's a healing process, but I'd like your perspective.
So wait, when just so I can clarify, when you say learning from wounding, you mean our own wounding or others?
Our own wounding, you know,
Yeah, so here's a couple things. So imagine this, okay? So I'm going to give you just a few quick kind of slices or ways to hold this. So let's take the multiple lives scenario. Let's say we're born multiple times and that the soul is evolving towards some evolution through life. Then we might argue that wounding itself is a part of the universe's, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this without being too offensive. It's a part of the universe's corrective impulse. That wounding itself is a part of the drive towards balance. And over the arc of lives, the value, to put a word on it, the value of wounding is that it is inviting evolution. It is inviting healing. It is inviting growth. It is inviting the aspiration for wholeness. And it's interesting, and Lanny, actually, you and I worked together at a time where we worked at a health resort together. And I'll tell you, when someone sat down for a private session with me and they said, well, I don't really, let me do this differently. They sat down with me and said, well, Lanny told me I got to talk to you. I'm a total mess. You know, I got a fucked up childhood and my work's a mess and blah, blah, blah. I'd be excited, like, great, like, let's get into this. And what I mean by that is you have motivation, you have direction, you have something to respond to. And when someone came in and sat down and said, well, I don't know, I was told to come and see you, but I don't really know why I'm so stuck. I had a great childhood, I have a good job, everything's nice. I'd be like, oh no, like, this is terrible. And why would I say that? Well, because they're so disconnected from the energy of change. They're so disconnected from the impulse to resolve that's actually a much harder person to work with. And if you look at the planet and some of the most powerful healers or agents of consciousness, very few of them fall into the category of unwounded. I mean, Oprah Winfrey may be a cliche, and I you know, some people don't like her as an example, but few people have catalyzed modern spirituality, psychology, personal growth, I mean, like her. I mean, Wayne Dyer doesn't even come close to impacting the world the way Oprah did. And he frankly wouldn't have without someone like her. But this is someone who had, like, as brutal a childhood as you could possibly imagine, is clearly still struggling with it. So my point being that that wounding itself appears to be an agent of evolution. Now, let me just add a couple other quick lenses on that. So let's strip away the past life idea and just say, hey, this life's the only life we've got. It sucks that we've been hurt. And wouldn't it be nice if we could just stop talking about our hurts and our wounds? And, like, does it really have to be such an important part of the path? Well, I'd say, of course. I mean, of course it's terrible that it exists at all, that any of us have been hurt. It's not something I celebrate. But on the other hand, is it also true that if we bring spirit, soul, and the best of the world around us to bear on our places of pain, disconnection, and wounding, is it also true that that can open us to our greatest experiences of joy and connection and peace? It is. It is. So one way or another, it's baked into the human experience. Now, here's the last point I'll make. And if you are in the Old Soul Republic newsletter, check it out because there's a link to a video that has something to say about this. And that is, here's the weirdest thing about the model, and it's probably where we have to wrap up today. I know, Nazila, you have your hand up. Maybe you want to pop your question in the chat. Here's the crazy thing. You look at the model, and one would ask the question, where are we most connected to life, to other people, to other beings? Well, some would say the universal, of course, because that's where we are all one. And I would say, well, that's kind of true, except that's more like easier said than done, right? Intellectually, I know we're all connected through spirit. We could also say it's through the essence, because when we share our essence, you know, or we see the essence of another, we feel connected. We feel like we're finding family. I don't know why the world is like this, but I will tell you my feeling or experience is that when we are honest about our wounds, and when we learn to accept them, and when we're honest about the vulnerability and the frustration and the smallness that we can feel because of them, I don't think there is a greater force in the world to connect us to others than that. I don't think I myself really knew anything about healing until I came to really acknowledge and feel my own wounds. Because how do you help someone else, right? How do we really help someone else from a place of being better than, or a place of not relating? I think the example is that if you get a group of people at a table and everyone shares, I've seen this frankly many times, they share what they're good at, they share what they're great at, they share how successful they are. They're never going to remember each other 5 years later. Oh yeah, there's that person with the great life. Who cares? You get 5 people to sit in a room together and talk about their deepest losses, what they struggle with. They'll be friends for life. You see that person 10 years later. And it seems that right or wrong, good or bad, like it or not, the wound is possibly our greatest and most potent place of connection. And so if nothing else, we can cherish that. So it's a big topic. I couldn't possibly do justice to what you asked, but at least we got that much.
Do I welcome it in? How do I view? I know what you're saying, but instead of reacting, ooh, that hurts, how do I just embrace it and say thank you or whatever?
Well, okay, so this is a big topic and maybe we just connect offline about it. But yeah, you might start off by just saying thank you, but more accurately, more realistically, because thank you doesn't feel good when it doesn't feel good. I would say start by being curious about it. Start and like, oh, wow. So here I am again. Oh, wow. This is what pain is like. Oh, wow. This is what disappointment is like. Oh, wow. This is what it's like to be in this year of my life and still having this feeling. Like, I'd say bring a bit of curiosity to it. But there's a lot of other ways we can work with our wounds. We can talk to them, right? Oh, is there something you want me to know today? Oh, right. Is there something you'd like me to see? There's a wonderful book called Conversations with the Body that's very interesting. And actually, even the Body Keeps Score, is that what it's called? I think that's a great book that yeah, I can see some people nodding. That's a very powerful book, The Body Keeps Score, to help us develop a new relationship to our wounds and wounding. Some people really like the Peter Levine work around trauma. But a lot of it is about cultivating a kind of loving relationship with our wounds as though they are like aspects of self, like family. There, Joni's holding up the book, The Body Keeps Score. So I'd probably dive into some of that as a starting point. And when you can objectify it, I am not my pain, but I am in relationship to it, then you can bring the soul in relationship to the wound. And the soul can be curious about it and learn from it. The spirit can accept it and love it for what it is. And of course, the big perspective is always to remember, whatever I have now, how is this like what I see in the world? How does this help me understand what I'm seeing around me? Because let's face it, I mean, the world's going cuckoo bananas, seems like, particularly in the United States. But what most of it appears to be is just a very and I mean this in a psychological, not a judgmental way. Most of it is just a very adolescent relationship to pain, right? It's like, if I can't get it my way, then fuck you. That's not right. That's not a way for a society to live. That's not a way for a relationship to blossom. So we're being invited to go deeper. And we don't have a lot of models for it. And we don't have a lot of experience for it. So if it's hard, fair enough. It is hard. I don't like it any more than you do. But we still have the choice to do the work and to say, oh, okay, so this is part of life. This is part of the condition. This explains the reactivity around me. This explains the pain around me. And what hopefully begins to emerge is compassion, both in the literal sense of compassion's root, to suffer with, and in the modern sense of being gentler, being kinder, being more patient, first with ourselves and then with others. So we do have to wrap up. That was a very juicy topic. Nazila, I have to apologize to you because I just couldn't get enough in today. Oh yeah, I like your, Nazila wrote a nice note. Yes, you can talk to it like a family member. Anyway, there's so much to say, right? We're just like barely beginning, but I want to be respectful of those of you that are kind of like, well, this was good, but I really got to go. So let me say, if you want to connect more, we're going to do this again next week. If you would like some material between sessions, you can join the Old Soul Republic newsletter, and you can find links to that on my website. It's just a no strings attached newsletter with content. This week's topic was the weakness of gratitude. I thought that was a clever title. And of course, there's all kinds of amazing material on Humanity's team. And so you can just fill your cup and fill your cup and fill your cup if this hasn't been enough. So we're going to end there. From my conditional self, from my wounded self, from my true self, and from the spirit in me that is you, I'm just going to say thank you. And I'm so grateful you were here. Mary, I love that. Lots of love to this circle. And may we hold each other in our prayers until we meet again. So lots of love, and we'll see
Are
you
you
soon.
here every Thursday?
Every Thursday, same time, same place.
I had no idea. It's the first
Here.
time I've heard you. It's wonderful.
Oh,
We
great.
should
Well, maybe
go.
we'll see you next week.
Yeah, maybe you will.
Awesome.
you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Spread
Thank
the
you, Jonathan.
word.
Thank you, Jonathan, and everybody.
Okay. Thank you all. Bye-bye.